afternoon. Thank you for coming to our IPSP Class 7 presentation. A select group of students here are going to be discussing some of the challenges and successes, their reflections on their summer field program. I'm Dr. Ellen Fitzpatrick. I'm the Director of the International Programs, and who you're going to hear from today are some of our stellar students. They're all stellar, but here they'll have some choice stories to tell you. I'd like to introduce the group to you and tell you where they were placed, where in the world they were placed, and then I'm going to probe them with a couple questions, and then certainly they can add on to that. But if at the end of our discussion you have some questions for them, please feel free. I'd like to start with Laura Crosby. Laura is from Boca Raton, Florida, and her country of project was Indonesia, and her host organization was Search for Common Ground. She'll tell you more about her work in a minute. And then next to her is Nathan Jessen. Nathan is from St. Paul, Minnesota, and he worked in Israel. His host organization was Ultimate Peace. Stan Luker is in the middle. Stan is from Wynn, I pronounced right, Arkansas. You can tell I'm not an Arkansan yet. And he served in the Philippines with Heifer International. He probably served the most time in a boat or in transit than many of our students. And Papi Muntumsi is from the DR, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and he worked there as well, and his host organization was the World Bank. So, Andrea, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Andrea. That's what I get when I look at paper and not people. Okay, Andrea Price, I'm sorry, is from Monticello, Arkansas. She worked in Belize, and she worked with the Youth Business Trust in Belize. So I guess since I was so grossly negligent, I'll start with Andrea. Andrea, would you start us off and talk about, give us sort of a 2-minute description of the kind of work that you did and the environment you were working in?
Okay, as Dr. Fitzpatrick said, I did my project at Youth Business Trust Belize, which is located in Belize City. They're committed to helping young entrepreneurs between the ages of 18 and 35 start their businesses. They offer enterprise development training, mentorship, and they also offer financing to those young entrepreneurs. Most of the entrepreneurs are from disadvantaged backgrounds. The age range is between 18 and 35. So they do work with youth. They're part of, Youth Business Trust Belize is a part of a huge organization called Youth Business International, which is committed to helping young entrepreneurs all over the world start businesses. So I was very fortunate to work there. My project consisted of writing the curriculum for and facilitating an entrepreneur and confidence building camp. The general manager, Deanna Gomez, informed me that that's what they really needed. So they had the vision, and I was tasked with fulfilling their vision. So I wrote the curriculum, facilitated the camp, and I evaluated the camp throughout the whole process to see what went well and what YBTB or Youth Business Trust can do in the future to improve upon that curriculum. I worked with youth that had businesses that ranged from agricultural businesses to used car salesmen. I also offered a train the trainer session for other organizations that work with young entrepreneurs, and I had to write those down so I wouldn't leave anybody out. They were Youth for the Future, which is another government organization, the National Garifuna Council, the Global Parish Project, Conscious Youth Development Program, and Leading and Empowering Others in Action. I trained all of those on the curriculum, and 3 of those organizations had already used the curriculum before I left Belize when they were working with their youth.
Okay, thank you. Papi, you want to go next?
I went to the Democratic Republic of Congo, my home country, and I was based in my home city to Kinshasa. You might not know much about the Democratic Republic of Congo. The country has been on the civil war for more than about 20 years now, where about 5 million people have died. and 2.7 of them are children under the age of 5, and 1.3 million are women. 1 in 5 children died before the age of 5, and the average life expectancy in the DRC is 47 compared to 79 in the US. And the government spends $2 per person on healthcare per year, compared to the US $3,100 per person per year. And more than 200,000 of women have been raped and abused sexually by people doing war and conflict in the DRC. So I work with the World Bank to try to coordinate. There are 20 countries that want to help the DRC to get out of the conflict and for peace and to reduce poverty. And 16 of those 20 countries agreed to work together to have a common strategy for economic approach to develop the DRC. So what I basically did to coordinate all those activities, to know who does what and where, how much money they put in every area they work, like health, agriculture, education. So, and then part of that, those are 16 bilateral countries, multilateral, like World Bank and IMF. So they should be selective, so or target 5 areas that I had to identify. We identify security, agriculture, infrastructure, education, and what was the health care. So that's what I did, so that all those 16 countries can work together and to help the DRC.
So yes, I spent my summer with Heifer International in the Philippines, and I feel like most of us are pretty familiar with Heifer's work, but one initiative that they have really pushed forward on, at least in the Philippines, and they're piloting it for other countries, is introducing a disaster preparedness component to all their projects. They want to, they want to ensure that all of these investments they're making in these countries, the families that are receiving the gifts and all of the communities that are benefiting can actually be resilient in the face of typhoons, flooding, earthquake, landslide. So I went and helped Heifer International Philippines conduct an evaluation of their pilot disaster preparedness projects. So I traveled and stayed in 13 different Heifer partner communities in the north, central, and southern regions of the country, and conducted focus group and one-on-one interviews with partner families, local government representatives, and also the representatives of partner NGOs that Heifer does a lot of work with. And through that research, my main focus was trying to identify the things that work the best, what was most popular in the communities, what are they still using, what are they still utilizing, and also areas for improvement. If they had any suggestions, what didn't work well, what do they still need help with after the projects have completed. And so through that research, I was able to create community-specific reports for all of the places I visited, and then also tie that all together to kind of evaluate the overall impact of the project. And hopefully this work will inform their future planning as they plan to conduct these disaster preparedness projects elsewhere in the country.
So I worked in Israel for an organization called Ultimate Peace, and what they did, they're a Sport for Peace program that brought together youth from Arab Israeli, Jewish Israeli, and Palestinian backgrounds and taught them how to play ultimate frisbee. And so my role in this was setting up in running the first year of an evaluation for this program. They hadn't done any evaluation previous to when I got there. So that entailed of, having focus groups of campers. They have their annual camp each July, and then also having a survey before and after and individual interviews of campers to see if they were successful in changing behaviors or attitudes. And I also interviewed Ultimate Peace staff and set up the evaluation for years in the future as well.
So I was in Jakarta, Indonesia, working for Search for Common Ground, which is a conflict transformation organization, and I was working on their initiative to empower women as leaders. Indonesia is the largest Muslim democracy in the world, and they do have a quota that says that 30% of their parliament should be women. It has to be women, but only about 19% of parliament is women, and those women aren't equipped with the skills they need to be effective leaders. And so Search for Common Ground was working to train women as effective leaders, giving them the skills they needed to be able to do gender budgeting, speak in public, work with the media, talk to their constituents. And so I developed a public speaking curriculum for them and a trainer's manual, as well as a resource guide for their one-on-one coaching they did with women parliamentarians, and a list of resources that their coaches could go to help facilitate this leadership training.
Thank you. So you can see that they represent many parts of the globe. And one of the things that the Clinton School International Field Program requires is that students, that this be graduate level work, that it be service. And probably one of the most important things is that they're serving a need that the host organization has, so that our students don't go in and say, you need this, this is what I'm going to do for you, but instead saying, what can I do for you? So as our students have gone to these many different parts of the world, they've all had a different set of challenges and experiences. So I'm wondering first, my first question to them is, what was your biggest challenge, both professionally and personally? You can decide how much you want to share. Professionally and personally in your international projects. Let me start on this side, Papi.
My biggest challenge was to time I had to spend working with different organizations, embassies. There were 16. I have to go on the facilities to dig the strategy, to know what they do, how much money they put on the project, on the DRC. And the people from different countries. I work for USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. I was with Canadian, French, Belgium, Sweden. So everywhere I went, there are different people, different culture, different way of working. And most of them were not really open to the strategy because they said themselves it was unclassified document that I cannot have access to that. But what we were doing was very important for all of them. So that was one, being in a different location with different people and a different culture. The other, my personal challenge was doing that. I was at the same time excited or doing something great for my country, but also sad to see much money international partner are putting to help the DRC, but it's not helping at all. I discovered it was almost 2.3 billion, that all of them 16 combined, except China, India, and Brazil, and South Africa. But only 16, it is 2.3 billion per year, but it's not doing anything on the populations. So that's two of my biggest challenges experience.
That's a big challenge. Andrea.
Well, my biggest challenge professionally was making sure that I was able to fulfill the vision that YBTB had for the project, and doing that over the internet. sending emails. I like to pick up the phone and talk to people and ask questions. But before I left, just getting a clear understanding of what my role was going to be and what the project was going to consist of was a challenge for me because it was all done over the internet. So about once a week, the project supervisor and I emailed each other from January until May to be sure we had a clear understanding. And it was also it was a challenge, but it was also an opportunity for me to use some of the things I learned here at the Clinton School to relate back to the project. Dr. Bavon taught us how to make logic models, which is a visual representation of a project. So I made a logic model to be sure that what I was doing was aligned with what the partner wanted. And once I got there, I asked questions and listened and asked questions and listened again to be sure that we were all on the same page. The biggest challenge personally was leaving my 1-year-old and 5-year-old and my husband for the summer. That was a really huge challenge. And as soon as I got back, my husband had to go for the rest of the summer for his job. So we were just trying to juggle being parents in 2 different places over the summer. So that was a huge challenge for me personally. But we overcame, we've made it. Okay.
I came across several challenges, but probably most prevalent across everywhere I went in the Philippines was communication. I was working with Heifer regional staff in each region of the country. Who all speak very good English. But everywhere we went, the Philippines speaks many different languages. So by the time my intentions were relayed to my counterparts at Heifer, they translated into one of however many local languages were necessary for that community. Things didn't always get there the way I'd intended them. And so I think one really good example was the first time we were doing a site visit and I was going to conduct interviews. Apart from being my first community experience, I was already pretty nervous. We went in and, we thought we had set up these interviews. We were going to go in and have a little welcoming ceremony, then we were going to get to work. Well, the community brought me in. We had this huge party at this local school up on the stage with all these government officials who had decided to show up. And then all the Heifer partner families were down in the audience kind of witnessing this and welcoming me to the community. Well, then I said, okay, it's time for the interviews. We can break this up. We'll go off and break into small groups. Well, they had understood that I was going to conduct these interviews over the community PA system with my microphone and with all the government officials, that they're intimidated by me, but also them. And so they asked that I conduct my interviews from the stage, asking questions down to the audience, and then they would somehow relay their answers. And I think y'all can see that didn't work it didn't turn out very well. So it was a learning experience, but we didn't collect very much data from that community. But anyway.
So there were a fair number of challenges. One that was both, I think, personal and professional for me was keeping some distance between myself and the organization. As an evaluator, it's my job to assess what's working well, what's not working well, and be very unbiased about everything. But when I got over there and started meeting the kids that are in this camp, and there's the Jewish Israeli kid from Renana who's 16, and he'd never met an Arab Israeli or Palestinian until he came to camp. It's hard because I see what a profound effect it has on them, and I want to we should make everything look good. It was like, well, no, that's not my job as an evaluator. So that was one of my toughest challenges, just remaining separate from the organization when they really tried to include me in everything, which was great, but I really needed to make sure that I wasn't just putting a positive spin on everything and remaining critical of the organization, even though I thought they did a great job.
Before you go on, Laura, I had a question. Remembering your reports this summer, they all sent in reports every 2 weeks. So I was kept busy this summer reading and responding, but I remember one of Nathan's quandaries was he's there to evaluate how well this game brings Israeli and Palestinian children, young adults together, but yet he was showcasing by his work, by his evaluation, what are the differences, how underlining that this person is Israeli and this person is Palestinian, and so almost going against what the mission of the project is by acknowledging those differences. So I remember wondering about how you handled that.
Right. Well, because a lot of they bring coaches from America mostly to coach in addition to Jewish Israeli and Australian coaches or whoever. And so what I was doing was asking kids about these differences, because if I want to figure out how effective Ultimate Peace is, I have to ask them those questions. They're not easy questions. And at the same time, these coaches and staff are trying to emphasize how we're all alike, the similarities, how I'm not that different, the Jewish kid from Renana isn't that different from the Palestinian kid from Beit Sahur. And so it was at times very hard for staff or for me or the kids, because it was somewhat conflicting nature of the evaluation. But I think I did a good job.
Thanks, Laura.
So my biggest challenge professionally was when I arrived on the ground in Indonesia, I found out that the project I had planned wasn't the project that the organization wanted at that point in time. So they had undergone some leadership changes from when I first started talking to them in January and when I came onto the ground in May. And so I spent the first week sort of redesigning my project and using what I knew from the past and designing my original project and talking to staff to figure out something that would work and address the needs that the organization had and what they wanted at that point in time. So it really was something that would be beneficial to them. So that definitely caused a little bit of a hiccup when I first got there, but we worked through it and it worked out well in the end. And personally, it was living in a city of 10 million to 12 million people that had no public transportation and no green space. They have some of the most amazing malls you will ever see. They have slides in them and amusement parks and crazy things like that, but no real outdoor space. And so that was a big challenge staying there over the summer, was learning how to adapt to this new climate and environment.
Okay. One of the challenges I remember Stan telling me about is he never knew where he was going to sleep the next night. Whether it be on a concrete floor of a school or in a posh hotel. So how did that affect your sleeping patterns?
I didn't get very much sleep this summer. But yeah, that was another thing. The nature of the project, going from site to site, I would spend on average 1 or 2 nights in a community, no more than 3 or 4. And so for 12 weeks, essentially, I spent a week in Manila at the beginning and at the end at the Heifer headquarters. We were just constantly running. So we would swoop in, spend time with the community, conduct the interviews, and then we'd either get in the car, get on the train, get on the boat, hop on a plane to the next community. And that went on for, I conducted interviews in 13 communities, but we visited several more than that. And so that was definitely a challenge that I think going in, I kind of understood that that's how it was going to go, but until I got there and really felt it, it didn't hit me. But
So you're the model of flexibility, huh?
I guess so.
All right. Well, one of the things that we hope in this field program, field experience, is that not only do they learn how to operate in an environment that's different, that may be uncomfortable at times, but we also hope that it's a transformative experience. How did your experience influence your way of thinking about your role in the world, your career choices, or what you see as your professional strengths and weaknesses? Pappy, you want to start us off again?
I didn't have much influence in the big institution like World Bank, but I had a small voice. The bank sent me to do something that they already got their own answer. They said, go ask people, interview people, work with people, ask them what the bank can do more, and let us know what we can do. I came back with the answer. One of the people, first priority was security. But when I came back with that answer and many others, the bank said, well, we cannot do that. We're not in security, but we can only do this, this, and this. So, and then I was like, why did you send me to ask people? Why not you doing what people are asking you to do? But the answer was like, we cannot do what is not in our mission. Our mission is to reduce poverty, and our mission is not to do security. That is the work of the UN. That's why there are UN peacekeeping in this country. The other thing I asked the bank to do, it was even in my report to the bank, was how they can do for the assistance commitment in the DRC be more effective. Why the bank is not doing evaluation of the program or the project. They told me that was the work of the government. Our first partner in this country is the government. We do our part, and the government of the DRC does its part. It is like that. And knowing a government like that in DRC, a corrupted government, mismanagement, that's why any of the work of the World Bank is having impact on people. Yeah.
So that's a pretty disconcerting conclusion, that much of the work that the World Bank hopes to do doesn't happen because there's such fragmentation between the government and other multilateral institutions. How does that make you feel about a career in a multilateral institution like the World Bank?
Actually, they offered me a job when I was there. They wanted me to go back work with them, but I think being in the World Bank, I felt myself powerless to do any change. The institution, its policy, strategy they do, I feel much maybe work for the government, but that is hard to get in the government like in my country, because it is something of certain family. The current president is the son of the president. The prime minister is the grandson of the former prime minister. It is same people. Let me tell you this, I had a chance to meet with the prime minister. I was telling him I am from the Congo, from this city. I'm going to school in the US, I'm getting education there. He was not paying attention to what I was saying. And I asked him for his business card, if we can keep in touch. He said, I don't have a business card. I don't have an email address. So he was not paying attention. So it is the only place I think I can be more influential. It is working for the government, because that's where everything is playing to change things in the country. But maybe not in the World Bank, even if they pay very good. But
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
One term that kept going through my mind the whole time I was in Belize was Ubuntu, basically, which means that my humanity is connected to your humanity. And as I go forward in this public service life, I have to always keep in mind that what the decisions I make will affect somebody, so I should always try to do no harm. And that theme just kept replaying for me while I was in Belize. That was the first time I'd ever been out of the country. So I just had to remember that my humanity is connected to the people in Belize, connected to the people in Mexico, connected to the people in the Congo, and the decisions I make should always be ones that should be beneficial and do no harm. So I just kept that in mind. One thing that I really learned about myself as a public servant is that I really love to facilitate conversations, and I had the opportunity to do that every day through the camp, and I hosted a World Cafe, which is a facilitation technique I learned here at the school. So I tried to tie in a lot of Clinton School stuff in my whole project. And through that experience of facilitating that World Cafe, the young entrepreneurs decided that they needed a young entrepreneur network in Belize. As a result, there are now 165 young entrepreneurs in that network. So I really enjoyed that facilitation, and I was able to see the power that convening and bringing people together has. One thing I realized that I don't like to do is evaluate. I evaluated the whole camp. I coded all of the answers from every session. The campers filled out an evaluation that evaluated me, evaluated the lessons, even evaluated the food that they were given. I did a pre-test, a post-test for the campers, and just going through all that data at the end of my project wasn't very enjoyable. So I realized then that's not something that I'm interested in doing as a public servant.
Andrea, do you think that your experience in Belize has influenced your next step after graduation?
Yeah, I really knew I wanted to do community work in some way on a local level here in Arkansas because I'm from here, but now I see I really want to do the community work through facilitation in some way. So what that way is, I haven't figured out yet, but hopefully I will figure it out in the next couple of months. So.
Okay, thank you.
I've been interested in working internationally or in that realm for quite some time. Prior to being a student here, I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and that was my first, true experience living abroad, complete immersion in another culture that where people do things completely different than you've grown up. The same house in Wynne, Arkansas for 18 years, but everything they do is different, but in some ways they're better, and you really learn a lot about yourself in an experience like that. So, short story, sorry. To make a long story short, if I can do that now, this experience going to another country just served to reinforce all the things I learned, about myself, about the world, and, just being able to witness how people do things differently. And in some cases, or many times we think, we've got the answers. We know what we're supposed to do. If we can just go teach people how to do something, everything will turn out all right. Just going and experiencing different cultures, and this being a reinforcing experience has really strengthened my commitment to trying to work for someone like Heifer International or working at USAID or in government. So that's really what I took from it.
Okay, so your question asked me about my role in the world, which is kind of a tough question to answer. But one of the things that struck me when I was in Israel is how often, we do this with everyone, but we think about, well, the Israeli people think this, or Palestinians are like this, and they behave this way. And even for a country the size of New Jersey, you really can't group them together like that. There are a lot of very opinionated people over there, and they disagree with each other on a lot of things almost all the time. And we also tend to forget about the Arab-Israeli population in Israel as well. And so that was one thing that really struck me about my role in the world and how previously I may have made that same mistake. And unlike Andrea, I really like evaluating. So when I think about my role as a public servant, creating and editing a survey, making it fit into 2 pages somehow so that, the kids, they don't stop paying attention, thinking about, oh, is this question better than that question? That's a lot of fun. The thing that I don't want to do is all the transcribing. So I conducted over 100 interviews, 8 focus groups. It was a lot. I had to transcribe all of it. It took a long time. So hopefully someday somebody can do that for me.
So I've been very fortunate in my life to travel a lot, but going to Indonesia, it was an opportunity to sort of humble myself and recognize the expertise of other people and the experiences they had. Being there, I had to take a step back a lot of times and sort of recognize what my organization was doing and the expertise of the local staff, and really try to fit within the culture they had and what they were trying to do. And it takes a minute to sort of, you go to the Clinton School and you've done all this work and you've learned all these things, but when you're there, it's about what the community needs and what the organization needs. And taking yourself completely out of your comfort zone to do that really is a humbling experience. And it gives you the opportunity to learn a lot about yourself and the world. And I learned that I don't want to work internationally. I like to travel, but I don't want to work there, especially if to really be effective, you have to have the language skills and the cultural background, and you have to commit to living someplace for a long time, really, I feel, to be an effective person working in that community. And at this point, I don't think that's what I want to do.
Okay. One of the things that Andrea reminded me of, one of the conversations that we had before the students left was to enter this experience with humility, and to be very aware of do no harm. I think Americans unfortunately have a history of bungling into countries and perhaps with good intent of really creating some serious problems. And this is open to anyone who wants to answer it. In your experiences, did you have a point where you were aware of, ooh, if I did this, I may be doing harm, or this element of the project may be a vehicle for doing harm, I need to step back? Did you have any of those cautionary moments?
Gang violence is an issue in Belize City, and one of the young entrepreneurs didn't come in because he was afraid of what might happen. He wouldn't come out of his house because he was under a threat by a gang. And I didn't want to be in a position where, I'm pushing this issue. I was concerned about his safety. And that just reminded me that I just can't put these young entrepreneurs who are growing up in a disadvantaged background, and some of them live in gang-infested neighborhoods, at risk by trying to come to a camp. So that was one instance where that really struck me, because it's kind of calming down right now, but over the summer there was a lot of gang activity going on in Belize City.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other thoughts?
And I touched on this earlier, but when I was originally putting together focus groups for camp, I thought it would probably be best if I had campers separated by community. The kids from Bethlehem, and then I'll have the kids from Tel Aviv or wherever. So I thought they might be more willing to open up if it was just people like them around. And I realized this and then talked to people about it, and my realization was confirmed that'd be detrimental to camp. At some point it's just a little bit too much, like what Dr. Fitzpatrick was talking about earlier with my project. And even if maybe it would have been different, I think that pulling the kids out and saying, oh no, this isn't for you, this is just for the kids from here, it was just too much and would have been too harmful.
Okay.
Everywhere I went, people ascribed a lot more importance and prestige to who I was, and they just assumed that I was some great figure from the U.S. coming over that could do a whole lot for them. And so a challenge I had and something that I had to be very careful of was, trying my best to tell people, hey, I'm just a student. I'm here conducting research, and while, we're asking you these questions about what went right, what went wrong, what could Heifer do to improve these projects, I had to be careful not to accidentally make any promises or give off the impression that I could actually make these things happen. And so that was one thing that was an area where I had to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other comments from the group? Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists? Please. Oh.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate all 5 of you. I've been in your shoes, and it's not easy. First of all, because you're probably scared to death in the beginning. But I think all of us feel the important thing is that you were able to represent us in what you did. I especially have questions for you, but I wanted to say I hope that I can add my encouragement that you do not just stop here with this one experience, that you continue to educate yourself. Because, as you've said, the United States has this funny ability to think that we can go in there and we do know it. We do not. And in fact, it's quite the contrary right now, that you go in with an open mind and that you walk in their shoes. You must do that before you do anything, and always ask questions. Here I am lecturing at you, but I think now that you've been over there, you probably see that that's true, and then you can evaluate how you can help. But you aren't as important as the end result. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. But as far as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, I have a specialty in Africa, and one of them is in the strife that's been going on over there. The one question I could never understand is why the killing is so brutal in the Congo, and why they just devastate the female population like they do. Because, I mean, if you're living with somebody and you're raising children and you have any hope for the future, I can't imagine doing what they do to each other. So I'd like for you to see if you could give me a little hope about what they're doing.
The conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo started in 1998. That conflict is not getting attention of the world media, international media, despite maybe because of the fact that most of the phones and gadgets, devices we use are made of the mineral, valuable mineral for the Democratic Republic of Congo. The most prominent one, it's a coltan. Coltan, we also call it white diamond. It is a black mineral. It fuels our phone, new phone, iPhone, video games, all kind of device. And that's what is really bringing conflicts in the eastern part of Congo. Eastern part of Congo, where people are being displaced every year, three times or even more because of that. And also the conflict has involved the Congo neighbor country. Almost 7 countries are also involved in that. There have been a lot of progress here in the U.S. Even President Obama, when he was senator, promoted about a law that will control every mineral from the Congo, but it wasn't very efficient, so it didn't bring anything. There have been a lot of people have been talking a lot about the Congo, but it's just very political issue that they don't want to talk more about that. And the people in the eastern part of the Congo, which is the richest part of the country, have been suffering a lot for that. We don't know. We also a very weak government is not doing much about that. We have 20,000 peacekeepers, or the UN peacekeeper in the Congo, the largest one ever since they started the UN, but they've been there for more than 12 years. They never tried to bring peace. And people are making trouble. They like Coney, you've heard about, they're using rifle that we go hunt deer. They're not very organized. They don't have any radio. They don't have any training, military training. Poor weapon, but we don't know why they never stop them. they're not like Taliban or Al-Qaeda. They are very organized structure. Those people have nothing, but they've been there making trouble for years and years.
Thank you. Other questions? One of the questions I had was, how did it feel to be a representative of where you represented the Clinton School, but perhaps more profoundly, an American? Did you feel that gave you a sense of privilege, or was there a sense of you wish you were a Canadian? Did you get a sense of that as you traveled through your different countries and in the regions?
So in Indonesia, they really like Americans. Every time I got into a taxi, they would ask me where I was from. And I would tell them I was from America, and the taxi driver would inevitably respond to me, Obama? Obama bagus, which means Obama's good. So it was a sense of, they really enjoyed having an American in their taxi driver, and they wanted to know where I was from and what I was doing. And they have a statue of Obama in front of his school in Jakarta. But it was definitely a sense of pride in Indonesia to be American.
Do you think it's because Obama grew up for part of his life in Indonesia?
Yes.
Yes. It wasn't because Americans are doing great things there.
No, it had a lot to do with Obama.
Other thoughts of being an American?
Well, I kind of hit on it earlier, or I didn't explain this was the reason, but one of the reasons everyone thought I was such an important person is that I was clearly American. So everywhere I went, people are saying the same things, and I got this in Peace Corps, and it wasn't so strange for me in this experience. But of course, people, you're automatically an expert. You've automatically got power to do things. And so people are vying for, just to talk to you or ask you questions. And so, it certainly was an issue. It also hurts in some ways when you're trying to, conduct, we'd go conduct focus group interviews, and, people have the opinion that, well, this guy knows everything. He's American. They're embarrassed to speak or talk. And so a lot of times, I kind of had to remove myself and let, my heifer counterparts facilitate a lot of the data collection we did. So.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Well, Nathan says he likes to evaluate. And so I'd like to know, do we hear the outcome of his evaluation? Did it help? Did it work? Both the two sides playing ultimate frisbee.
Okay, so one of the tough things for me was I set up, this was the first year of a monitoring evaluation that's going to be, hopefully in place for the next 5 to however many years. I didn't plan beyond year 5. But it's the need for results, or they want to know right away, is listen, we're applying for grants. We want to show that we're making a big difference. And I was like, well, that's great, and hopefully you are, but this is year 1. You're establishing a baseline a lot of the time in year 1. So I was able to show them some differences in the data between pre and post camp, but year 1, a lot of the time, was just about establishing a baseline so they can compare years 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and then they'll be able to show this is how far we've come since 4 years ago. So that's when the much more serious results will hopefully start showing.
Oh, that's not a very good story. Come on, you need a little more drama there. Yeah. A good social scientist. Did you have a question? Oh, okay, about the evaluation. Other questions? Okay, one more? Okay.
One of the most rewarding things I think I found in my own international experiences was for living in places for an extended period of time was my ability to fully engage in life in those particular countries. So I was having this wonderful professional experience, but also I had several moments or experiences of being engaged in the culture and realizing that I was a part of it. And so I'd like to ask you all if there was some experience or epiphany or anything like that where you really felt like you were a part of the all-encompassing life in that situation.
Well, I practically ate kosher for 2.5 months without really trying. So there's that. It's but I think it's really hard because at least for me, when I first arrived, I felt so different, you know, and that's what really sticks with you for at least a while for me. And, you know, not being able to speak the language or read the language in my case, since it was Hebrew. But I think at some point after you've been there for 2 months, you have bonding experiences with other people. So really my connections were with the other people, and that's where I got some of that feeling from.
Belize is a very diverse country. There are mestizos, Garifuna, lots of expats. So I was able to meet lots of different people from lots of different cultures. I was even invited to present at the National Garifuna Youth Convention. One of the leaders of the organization invited me to come. So I was able to spend a whole weekend with this wonderful, rich Garifuna culture. I was able to eat the food. I was able to see the dances, hear the language. It was absolutely amazing. So I was able to become a part of that culture for a weekend. Also, my supervisor's parents owned one of the most famous restaurants in Belize at one point. And so every Sunday, I was able to go to Sunday dinner at her family's house. So I was able to eat the food, hear the Creole language, pick up a few words. So I really enjoyed that opportunity. Work was great, but being able to interact with the wonderful people I met there was even better.
Well, thank you very much, panelists, and thank you very much for listening to our presentation.